Let's call to mind our long-term motivation once again. And recall that even though there's no findable me, that there's still a merely labeled me that is practicing the path and will become a Buddha. But when you search for who's practicing the path and who will become a Buddha, you cannot find anyone. So it's primarily on the basis of the mental aggregates that we say, I'm practicing the path. But there's no I to be found who is practicing the path. But we still have to practice the path if we want to get anywhere. So let's generate a motivation of compassion and an altruistic intent regarding all these beings who are unfindable, who are said to be living beings simply on the basis of physical and mental processes that interact and arise dependently. And so through all of our interactions, all of the dependent arisings that occur, set the strong intention that all of us can go towards full awakening. So there's one question about, do permanent phenomena have parts? Yes, they do. So if we have one permanent phenomena is permanent space, the absence of obstructability that allows things to exist in it. So we have the empty space in the east, we have the empty space in the west. In dependence upon all those parts, we label space. In terms of emptiness, we have the emptiness of all these individual phenomena, and on the basis of that, we label emptiness as a generality. Okay? Then, mere dependent designation. So we started with the snake, didn't we? When a snake is imputed to a coiled speckled rope in a dimly lit area, nothing on the side of the rope is a snake. Similarly, when we impute snake in dependence on a long coiled being, nothing on the side of that being, its body, mind, or the collection of the two, nothing is a snake. We may think, but there has to be something that is a snake from the side of the coiled being. Otherwise, there is no reason for it. There's no reason for it and not the coiled rope to be a snake. So the snake, there's a difference between the rope and the snake. There's got to be something on the side of the snake. However, when we search for something that makes the coiled being a snake, we can't pinpoint anything. There's nothing there. But it's still a snake, and it can still bite you. Or it could slither by and wave as it's going. Similarly, when I is designated in dependence on the aggregates, there is nothing from the side of the aggregates that is I or me. The person is not one aggregate, the collection of aggregates, or the continuum of the aggregates. So what makes designating snake in dependence on the long coiled being, or designating I in dependence on the aggregates valid, while designating snake on a rope and eye on the face in the mirror erroneous. The coiled being can perform the function of a snake, and the eye can function as a person. The coiled rope and the reflection of a face cannot perform these functions. But there's nothing in the collection of the aggregates or in the long coiled being that alone performs the function. In fact, the fact that things can exist dependent on being merely designated does not mean that whatever our mind thinks up is real, or that whenever we designate something with a term, it becomes that object. Okay, so we can't just go around saying anything is anything. Thinking there are real people in the television doesn't mean there are, and calling a telephone grapefruit doesn't make it one. 3 criteria establish something as existent. 1, it is well known to a conventional consciousness. That is, some people can identify the object. In other words, some people know what it is and there's a name for it. 2, it is not discredited by another conventional, reliable cognizer. Okay, so the perception of someone with unimpaired senses does not negate it. So if in the distance, in the middle of a field, we see something and we say, oh, there's a person out there. Yeah. If somebody else can look and see it more clearly and say, no, it's not a person, it's a scarecrow. Yeah. Our senses were impaired because we couldn't see it clearly. Their senses are unimpaired, and that can negate it. In other words, just because we call a scarecrow a person doesn't make it a person. Okay? And then the 3rd criteria, it is not discredited by ultimate analysis. So a mind realizing emptiness cannot refute its existence. So if I say, oh, there is an inherently existent external creator who created the universe and is the absolute nature of the universe. Okay? So many people believe that. That fulfills the 1st criteria. The 2nd criteria, they can't really refute it. Yeah, because to refute the existence of an absolute, external, inherently existent creator, you need a mind that realizes emptiness or that has some capacity to understand emptiness. So a conventional valid cognizer can't do that. So it's this ultimate analysis that discredits the existence of some inherently existent absolute truth of some sort. Okay? In short, while all conventionally existent phenomena exist by being merely designated by mind, everything that is designated does not necessarily exist. Okay? So I can call this a diploma, but it doesn't make it one. Okay. Why not? Because one of you can come along and say, I know what a diploma is, and it has these and such characteristics, and there's agreement in the world that it has these characteristics, and this doesn't. Yeah, so sorry, this isn't the diploma you've always wanted. Okay, then emptiness and dependent arising are compatible. The levels of dependence are related to each other. We know through direct experience that things depend on causes and conditions. Certain medicines cure particular diseases, and pollution adversely affects our health. So we know that level of causality. By reflecting deeply on the observable fact of causal dependence, we will see that the ability for effects to arise from causes is due to their being interdependent by nature. So there's some interdependent relationship between causes and their effects. Their possessing an interdependent nature enables causal influences to produce effects when suitable conditions come together. But what makes phenomena have this dependent nature? So there's some mutually dependent nature, but what makes them have that nature? Through examination, we see that that only because everything lacks inherent existence and nothing is a self-enclosed, independent entity, can things have a dependent nature that enables them to have conditioned interactions with other things. So it's only because things are empty that they can relate to each other, that they can depend on each other, that they can affect each other. If things had an inherent nature that did not depend on anything else, such that everything was had its own essence and was self-enclosed, then nothing would have an interdependent nature. So causality could not function at all. Okay, so it's only because things are empty that they have this interdependent nature. Thus, on the basis of the observed fact of causal dependence, we go through this chain of reasoning culminating in the realization of the emptiness of inherent existence, which in turn enables us to understand that all phenomena exist by mere designation, mere name. Okay? So you have an understanding of causal dependence leading to an understanding of interdependence, leading to an understanding of emptiness, and that leads you to understanding that all phenomena exist by mere designation and mere name. Okay, that doesn't mean you never think about mere designation and mere name until you get there. But to have a really robust understanding, it has that sequence. So although phenomena are empty of inherent existence, they exist. We see that each thing has its own effects. How do they exist? There are only two possibilities. Okay? Either inherently in their own right or by mere designation. So there's no other possibility. Either things have their own essence, or they exist without their own essence, and they exist simply by designation, by term and concept. So if you negate one of those two, you're left with the other one. So when we negate inherent existence, then there's no other way that things can exist aside from being merely designated. Probing deeper, we see that inherent existence, phenomena existing from their own side, unrelated to anything else, is untenable. Okay, so we go through all these reasonings and we see that it becomes very difficult to assert inherent existence. If they possess such a reality, the more we search for their identity, the clearer it should become. So if things had an essence, the more we search for that essence, the clearer that essence would become. But when we look for who the real me is, or what the real anything is, we can't find it. In fact, when we subject phenomena or people to critical analysis, they are unfindable, indicating that they lack inherent, independent, or objective existence. When we understand that things exist but not inherently, the only conclusion we can reach is that they exist depending on mere designation by term and concept, that is, by thought and language. Since they do exist, their existence can only be established on the level of dependent designation. There's no other way we can establish things as existing, aside from dependent designation. In this way, understanding emptiness in terms of causal dependence eventually leads us to understand dependent arising in terms of emptiness. Okay. Emptiness and dependent arising are seen as fully integrated and non-contradictory after arising from meditative equipoise on emptiness. The world does not cease to exist with the realization of emptiness. Rather, our understanding of how it exists becomes more accurate. So realizing emptiness does not destroy any external phenomena, doesn't destroy anything except our own misconception. So it doesn't make things that used to be inherently existent empty of inherent existence. Okay? And it doesn't make things that exist non-existent when you realize their emptiness. It just means we're seeing them accurately for the first time. The I aggregates karma and its effects, and other phenomena are falsities in that they do not inherently exist, although they appear to do so to our ordinary senses. Knowing they exist dependently, not inherently, enables us to relate to people and our environment in a more spacious way. And then here we have a very famous quotation from Nagarjuna, chapter 24 of the Karikas. That which arises dependently we explain as emptiness. This emptiness is dependent designation. Just this is the middle way. So what's the middle way? It's this integration and compatibility of dependent arising and emptiness. Because there is no phenomena that is not dependently arisen, there is no phenomena that is not empty. And because there is no phenomena that is not empty, there is no phenomena that is not dependently arisen. The two go together. Arising dependent on other factors, such as causes and condition, parts, and terms and concept, is the meaning of emptiness of inherent existence. Because actions depend on other factors, they produce results. This would be impossible if they existed inherently or independent of other factors, such as our motivation, the person we were acting on, the action we did, the tools we used to do the action, whatever. This understanding, which unites dependent arising and emptiness, negates both inherent existence and total non-existence. Dependent arising and emptiness are inseparable qualities of all existence. It is the true middle way. Although emptiness and dependent arising are compatible and come to the same point, they are not the same thing. This is important. Emptiness and dependent arising are not the same thing. If they were, then just by perceiving an instance of dependent arising, such as a book, or the principle of dependent arising, we would perceive emptiness. But when you perceive this book, do you perceive emptiness? No. If emptiness and dependent arising were identical, you should. Seeing one would automatically mean you saw the other. Empty and arising dependently are two ways of looking at phenomena. The fact that they are empty does not prevent conventional distinctions among objects. So the fact that things are empty does not mean that on the conventional level they all become the same thing. Oh, I've realized emptiness. So your money is now my money because it's all oneness. No. Okay? So conventional distinctions still exist, but they exist dependently, not due to some kind of inherent essence. The fact that they are empty does not prevent conventional distinctions among objects. Pens and tables still have their own unique functions. Someone who realizes emptiness discerns these when she emerges from meditative equipoise on emptiness. So when she's in the meditative equipoise on emptiness, directly perceiving emptiness, there's no appearance of tables and chairs and people and so on. When she comes out of that emptiness, that meditative equipoise, all these things appear again, and the conventional distinctions among them appear. And she knows that that appearance is false. That they, although they appear inherently existent, they are not. If dependent arising referred only to causal dependence, it would refute the inherent existence of only causally conditioned phenomena. Because here dependent arising means dependent designation. It establishes the emptiness of all phenomena. So it's not that some things inherently exist and the rest are empty. Across the board, they're all empty. To understand this subtlest level of dependence, understanding mutual dependence is necessary. And to understand that, understanding causal dependence is vital. These three levels of dependence are progressively subtler, although they are not mutually exclusive. So understanding one doesn't prevent you from understanding the other, and they aren't separate things, okay? But they are progressively more subtle. Dependent arising is called the king of reasonings because it not only negates independent existence, but it also establishes dependent existence. The term dependent arising itself shows the middle way view that phenomena are empty and yet exist. Dependent shows that they're empty of independent existence, eliminating eternalism. Arising indicates they exist, eliminating an annihilation. All phenomena that exist lack any inherent nature. Nevertheless, they exist dependent on other factors and are established by reliable conventional cognizers. So those reliable conventional cognizers are reliable only in terms of identifying what an object is on the conventional level and identifying its conventional function. The conventional reliable cognizer is not reliable in terms of establishing something as empty of inherent existence, because that's not in its purview. So you can have this conventional reliable cognizer even though things are appearing to it to be inherently existent. Okay, so it may still have that appearance. It's not grasping at phenomena as inherently existent. If it did, it would be ignorance, which is an erroneous consciousness. But still, things appear inherently existent to it. Yeah, but it's not reliable in terms of that level of how, its actual mode of understanding. It's only reliable in terms of ascertaining that a gong makes noise and a tissue is useful if you have to blow your nose. Okay? So now, the Pali tradition, terms, concepts, and conventions. The Buddha explains the danger of not correctly understanding terms and concepts. So here's what he says. Those who go by names, who go by concepts, making their abode in names and concepts, failing to discern the naming process, these are subject to the reign of death. The reign of death means you get reborn in samsara. Okay? The commentary says that what goes by names and concepts is the aggregates. When ordinary people perceive the aggregates, their minds misconceive them to be permanent, pleasurable, and having a being or having or being a self. Okay? Due to these distorted conceptions, people then make their abode in names and concepts, generating all sorts of afflictions in relation to the aggregates. So first you see the aggregates, you misconceive them to be permanent, pleasurable, and then having a self or being a self. And then you generate all, so that's the meaning of going by names and concepts. And then you have all sorts of afflictions. I like this, I want more, I'm jealous of it, I want to destroy it, I don't care about it, get it away, it doesn't interest me. Okay, so we generate all sorts of afflictions in relationship to the aggregates, don't we? Yeah, to our body, to our feelings, to our mind, all sorts of opinions and afflictions and judgments. Okay, and so that is what's called making their abode in names and concepts. So if we fail to discern the naming process, how all of that arises, then we're stuck in samsara. When I read the same verse from the Madhyamaka view, those who go by names and concepts, in other words, okay, this is my reading, is you assume that you don't make a difference between the designated object and the basis of designation. Okay? So who go by names and concepts, you confuse the designated object that exists by term and concept with the basis of designation and think they're the same, so you think there is something that is the object. And so thus you make your abode in names and concepts, and you grasp those things to exist inherently. And then failing to discern the naming process, so you fail to discern how things exist by being merely designated, then you're subject to the reign of death. You're reborn in samsara. That's my Madhyamaka reading of the verse. But it fits, doesn't it, by the words that are there. Then the Itivutaka commentary. The Itivutaka, it has really these beautiful sutras, small sutras in it, and sayings that are just beautiful. So it explains the same verse, saying that beings who make their abode in names and concepts apprehend the aggregates as I or mine. Or when the aggregates are not theirs, they apprehend them as another person. Okay, so similar to my Madhyamaka thing, they're imputing, the jikta, the view of the personal identity on the aggregates. Those who do this are subject to death and rebirth in cyclic existence, because the view of the personal identity is the root of samsara. So the same sutta continues. He who has discerned the naming process does not suppose that one who names exists. No such case exists for him in truth, whereby one could say, he is this or that. So someone's Pali explanation, someone who understands the naming process, understands the aggregates and know them as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, and abandons craving for them by actualizing the supreme path, the Arya path. This Arhat does not grasp what is labeled as I, my, or myself, in dependence on the aggregates to be a real person. So remember, in the suttas, the Buddha was always saying, asking someone in the Pali Suttas, is this I? Is this me? Is this mine? Is this I? Is this myself? So here's that same thing. That person discerns that what is labeled, but the arhat does not grasp what is labeled as I, mine, or myself in dependence on the aggregates. They don't grasp that to be a real person. After leaving behind the aggregates and attaining nibbana without remainder, the arhat cannot be said to be this or that. So remember, I was saying that they didn't, the Pali Suttas, they don't describe too much actually what happens to an arhat after they abandon the body, and attain nirvana without remainder. So this is about what they say. Okay, the arhat cannot be said to be this or that. Okay. So my reading, my Madhyamaka reading, he who has discerned the naming process, so you understand how dependent designation works, does not suppose that one who names exists. So when we discern the naming process, sometimes we then ask, who is doing the naming? I want to know who is doing the naming. Or maybe that person's thinking, I'm doing the naming, and grasping themselves as inherently existent. So they have some intellectual, if somebody has some intellectual understanding about dependent arising, they may still think that they're inherently existent. But someone who's discerned the naming process and understands things are only dependently designated does not suppose that one who names exists. So they don't grasp themselves as an inherently existent person. And they don't think there's some, external person who's in charge of all the names, who gives them out so that they now have a dependently existent essence. They don't have that kind of mind. And then after leaving behind the aggregates and attaining nirvana without remainder, the arhat cannot be said to be this or that. So this inherently existent, that totally non-existent. So an arhat does not grasp at either of those two extremes, or can be said to be either of those two extremes when we look at them. That's my Madhyamaka reading. Okay. In several suttas, the Buddha explains that seeing not self with wisdom does not destroy conventional discourse and the ability to communicate with others through the use of language. Okay. So it's not like, well, everything's just merely designated by our mind fabricating concepts and giving names, so none of these things really exist, so we're going to go totally nonverbal now, and everything that has to do with names and concepts is just useless, unreliable, polluted. Let's be done with it. Okay? So it's not like that. Conventional discourse, the Buddha says, does not necessitate grasping a self. Words, names, expressions, and concepts can be used by arhats who have eliminated all self-grasping. So if you look, the Buddha himself uses names and language. Yeah, does the Buddha grasp at inherent existence? No. Aryas, in all three vehicles, use names and concept. Doesn't mean that they're grasping at inherent existence. The Buddha clarifies that an arhat uses words and concepts in accord with how things are done in the world, without grasping them as self. An arhat with his last samsaric body still uses conventional language that corresponds to how ordinary beings speak. Okay, so the arhat doesn't have their own secret language, and they, okay. The commentary says they do not violate the conventional discourse by saying the aggregates eat the aggregates robe. Okay, so the aggregate, the body is walking down the street. Okay, so I'm teaching to a bunch of bodies. No, not a bunch of bodies. There's a bunch of minds. Okay, so there's no people here. There's just a bunch of minds. So all of you disappeared. Yeah. Okay, the arhats don't talk that way. Yeah. If they didn't speak in a way that others could understand, how could they teach the Dharma? Okay, so arhats certainly out of compassion teach the Dharma. While arhats use words such as I, mine, and myself, this does not indicate that they are subject to the conceit I am. They are beyond conceiving due to craving, views, and conceit. Okay, so the conceptual processes that are fueled by craving, wrong views, and conceit, an arhat doesn't have craving and views and conceit, so they don't use concepts that are fueled by those. The Buddha elucidates. There are merely names, expressions, turns of speech, designations in common use in the world, which the Tathagata uses without grasping them. Okay. Names and concepts can be used in two ways. Someone who has ignorance and the view of personal identity uses words and concepts believing there's a true object to which they refer, a self in these phenomena. So this person is a racist, and this person is a Muslim, and this person is, a bigot, and this person is gay, and, all these terms and concepts, and things that all of them exist inherently in those people. They don't. Yeah? All of them exist dependent on different factors. Yeah, somebody being a racist, they aren't a racist all by themselves, existing alone. Yeah, somebody's not a racist by just existing by their own. There's cause and conditions. They have certain thoughts. They have certain experiences. They have certain ignorance. Okay, so there's all sorts of things that cause this. So we shouldn't just give somebody some label and say that's all they are, that's who they are, they can't change. Yeah, and similar, whether you call it somebody an evangelical Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist or an atheist, none of those people are that. Those are simply terms imputed on certain characteristics, but they are not who that person is. The same goes for women and men, and gay and straight, and Republican and Democrat. None of those things are a person. They're just convenient designations we give to a certain group of characteristics. But if you change any of those characteristics, then that label, that term, is not going to apply. Okay? So people can change. Yeah. And anyway, we don't always agree what are the common characteristics of a racist or of a whatever. Yeah. Like the definition, who is American? This is one of the biggest debates we have. Who is American? The Mexicans say, why are you calling yourself, Americans? Yeah, America is this whole continent, and you're claiming it for yourself. And we Mexicans and the Canadians, we're also Americans. Really, they don't like when we say that, call our country America. They don't like it at all. You're the United States. Okay. But then I say to them, but you're the United States of Mexico. So that makes us the United States of what? Yeah. You're the United States of Mexico. We can't just be the United States because that would get confused with you. Okay. But we can't be the United States of America because that offends the Mexicans. Does it offend the Canadians? You guys don't care. Yeah. Yeah, easygoing Canadians. Yeah. It offends the Colombians. Well, you're South Americans. It's the whole thing is still America. Even if we smear it all together, it's not North America and South America. So are you the United States of South America? Or the United States of Colombia? The Republic of Colombia. But Colombia is also a university. No, it isn't. It is. Columbia is with an O. Columbia. The university is with an O. It's with a U. I've misspelled it for a long time. Okay. Anyway, we all know that all these other countries are just extra states in the United States of America. But look, if you were another state, then we wouldn't have all this problem with NAFTA. Yeah? Then Trump couldn't dissolve NAFTA. Oh, yeah, and Russia said, we will conquer you, so we better be afraid, otherwise we'll be part of Russia. Russian Federation. Oh, it's a Russian Federation, including us now. Yeah. Yeah. So, we look at all these different things, and the names changes, and we fight over names. All the time we fight over names, don't we? Yeah. Those free from ignorance and the view of a personal identity do not grasp at true reference of words and concepts. They know they're just conventions. They don't confuse the designation with the object and think that they're the same thing. They use them merely as conventions to convey a meaning without grasping at a self in the objects to which they refer. Because if I looked at you and said, you, the name Semke is in you and refers to only you, then there could be only one Semke. Now, I know you believe that. But, excuse me, but I know some other people, that are Semke, okay? Yeah. And when you file your income tax, you don't say Tuptikan Semke, do you? Yeah. So are you lying on your income tax? Yeah, she's not using her name on her income tax. She's filing under an alien name. Huh? At least she's filing, yes. Yes. But really think about it. We fight all the time over names. Just what we're going to call something. Yeah. It's the source of so much conflict because we think the name is in the object. Yeah. That name has some real referent to it, and it doesn't. Okay, chapter 9, we're moving along here. Okay, Pali tradition. The Buddha practiced the jhanas, so those 4 levels of meditative equipoise in the material realm, and recommended this meditation to his disciples to overcome hindrances by drawing the mind away from sensual pleasure to more refined states of happiness and then to awakening. So he really, emphasized the importance of the jhanas, not only because they lead, not only because you need that for realization, according to some presentations, but because by training in the jhanas, we draw ourselves away from this incredible attachment to sense objects. And we're able to turn the mind inward a little bit more and focus on something more valuable. However, if we are not vigilant about maintaining a Dharma motivation, there is danger of becoming attached to the bliss and peace of the jhanas, and thus being distracted from eliminating defilements. To remedy this, the Buddha advised meditators, after emerging from a jhana, to examine the jhana in terms of the 3 characteristics. Seeing that it is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, they will not become attached to it and will cultivate liberating insight. So this is brilliant. You develop single-pointedness. You have, one of the 4 jhanas. Yeah, you really, they say that you drench your mind in bliss and peace, meditating in the jhanas. But that's not sufficient. So when you come out of that meditation, then you reflect with an analytical mind at the whole dependent process of what the jhana is. So there's the primary mental consciousness, there's the 5, or I can't remember how many omnipresent mental factors the Pali tradition has. They may have 7. Anyway, there's a certain number of omnipresent mental factors. Yeah, so definitely feeling and contact and intention and attention and so on, And there's also the mental factor of mindfulness, the mental factor of concentration in there. Yeah, and you reflect how all of this is done on the basis of having a body, because by having a body, then you can sit in meditation and use your mind to generate the jhanas, and how it depends on having a teacher who gave you the teachings of the jhanas, which depend on the Buddha, having explained these. So you really analyze that the jhana is not, that mental state is not permanent. It's not. It's not pleasurable, and it is pleasurable, but it's not inherently pleasurable, okay? And it's not self, okay? So it's in the nature of dukkha, it's not self, it's transient. So that brings the whole insight side right after you've generated this jhana. So then you don't, and dwelled in the jhana, so then you don't grasp it as some solid thing, as I or as mine. That's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah? That's something to really integrate into our practice, that whatever meditation we do, as we come out of it, to really think of the meditation, the mind that meditated, as just a dependently arising process, dependent on all these other conditions and items. The ultimate purpose of developing deep concentration is to unite it with insight wisdom and to use the union of the 2 to eradicate defilements completely. The 4th jhana is the door to the 3 higher knowledges. Okay, knowledge of the past. These are the 3 higher knowledges that the Buddha generated on the night that he, right before he attained awakening. So knowledge of past lives, knowing one's own past lives, knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings according to their karma, and knowledge of the destruction of all pollutants in one's own mental continuum. The Buddha used the concentrated mind of the fourth jhana to gain these three knowledges, whereby he uttered, "I directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being." So that's what an arhat says upon coming out of the meditation in which they achieved final arhatship. Okay. How we balance the cultivation of serenity and insight to attain liberation depends on our faculties and the guidance of our spiritual mentor. Ananda speaks of 4 ways through which practitioners may attain arhatship. So 1 is we first practice serenity, and based on that tranquil, undistracted mind, cultivate insight by contemplating the 3 characteristics so that the supramundane path will arise. So that would be, for example, what I just described. You generate serenity, you attain serenity or the jhanas, and then you come out and you use and the analytical process to generate wisdom, knowing the 3 characteristics, and then from there you can break through to nirvana and attain the supramundane path. Okay. Second way you can do it, we cultivate insight by contemplating the 3 characteristics, thus weakening the 5 hindrances. We then develop serenity, unite it with insight, and attain the supramundane path. So here, you use insight to see the impermanence, the nature of dukkha, and the not self of the 5 hindrances. Because remember, those 5 hindrances impede you from gaining serenity. So first you lessen them, you subdue them by realizing, or at least maybe not realizing, but at least understanding them in terms of the 3 characteristics. That in turn helps you to generate serenity much more easily, much easier than if you're just generating serenity fresh. Okay, so you have insight, then do the serenity, then unite them, and then go to the supramundane path. Then the third way to do it, we cultivate serenity and insight together, alternating between the 2. So we attain the first jhana, and after emerging from it, examine its constituents with insight, seeing them as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Okay, we then do this with the second jhana and so forth. So you're going back and forth between serenity and insight, serenity and insight, serenity and insight. Okay? Then the fourth way, and this way has always been a puzzle for people to understand. Okay? So the mind is seized by restlessness regarding the Dharma. According to the Visuddhimagga, this mental agitation is due to the 10 imperfections of insight. So these are exceptional experiences that practitioners overestimate as indications of attainment instead of seeing their impermanence. So practitioners do this all the time. We have some exceptional experience in meditation, and it's like, I got it, And this experience, I got to hold on to. I got to make it permanent. And it's definitely a real experience, and I'm close to realization, Meanwhile, what's your mind doing? It's grasping impermanence. It's grasping what's in the nature of dukkha as pleasurable. It's grasping what doesn't have a self as having one. Okay. So this happens all the time. So that's why when you have like really fantastic meditations or extraordinary experiences or something, just say to yourself, that's nice. It's good that I can have these. And now I need to keep meditating on my practice with my feet on the ground. Okay. Don't try and recreate those experiences, because trying to recreate them becomes an obstacle in itself. Just delight that, wow, I know that such a feeling, such an experience is possible, and leave it at that. Yeah. Don't go, I saw Kuan Yin. She appeared before me. Oh, the real, truly existent Kuan Yin. Yeah, who teaches me emptiness. Appeared before me. Did she appear before you? No. Oh, I'm so sorry for you. But she appeared before me. So I must be really close to having realizations. Don't do that. Okay. So, yeah, so it's important to see that, not grasp these, have what they call the 10 imperfections of insight. When this agitation is stilled and the mind settles down, becoming unified and concentrated, the supramundane path arises. Another interpretation is that this agitation is mental restlessness produced by exceptional eagerness to realize the Dharma. You really want to get that realization. Okay? So in some cases, some, not all, cases, this can precipitate realization of the truth, as seems to have been the case for the ascetic Baiya. Baiya Daruchirya. And his story is in the Udana. Do you remember? Oh, you just read it. Okay.
He sailed 7 times, and on the 8th time he was shipwrecked, and then he lost his clothes, wore bark. They thought he was an ascetic, and he thought he was an ascetic. Then this God said from a previous life, "No, you're not." Took him to the Buddha. He met the Buddha. He was very eager, and the Buddha taught him very short things about thoughts are not thoughts and stuff like that. He became an arhat.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Then I want to become a monk." He said, "Get your bowl and robe," and on the way to do that, he got gored to death by an ox. And the Buddha said it was not his karma to become a monk in his last life.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. He still had some heavy negative karma there, didn't he? Okay. So each of the 4 ways leads initially to stream entry and ultimately to the elimination of all fetters, underlying tendencies, and pollutants. Everyone who has attained liberation has done so in one of these 4 ways. The first 3 ways are taught by Theravada meditation masters at present. So the 4th way is really, it's a puzzle for everybody, including the Theravada masters. Both serenity and insight are necessary to actualize stream entry, even though an individual may emphasize one or the other at the beginning. When our practice is mature, serenity and insight are brought into harmony so that both are present, supporting each other. When they are unified, the mind remains steady and tranquil on the meditation object, while insight sees deeply into the nature of phenomena. In the supramundane path, serenity and insight arise simultaneously in a balanced way, the former being right concentration, the latter being right view of the Eightfold Noble Path. The suttas are not clear about the degree of samadhi needed to become an arhat. Some suggest that at least the first jhana is necessary, while some commentaries say access concentration is sufficient. So access is serenity but you haven't yet gained, you haven't, the five hindrances have been temporarily suppressed, but they haven't been overcome by the jhanic factors yet. That only occurs with the first jhana. Okay? But you're close, so it's access. It's the access that enables you to go to the first jhana. In the latter case, so that those who say that access concentration is sufficient for becoming an arhat, the person is called a dry wisdom arhat. Okay? Because wisdom without the moistening effect of jhana is dry. Okay? Even though it still can eradicate the defilements. So that person has eradicated the fetters, necessary to become an arhat through the access concentration. But their mind isn't moistened. They say that when you attain the jhanas, your mind is moistened. Your mind becomes, exceptionally soft and really malleable and so on. So they're called a dry wisdom arhat. Okay? Yeah, they're dry. Yeah. But they're still an arhat. And it was interesting when I was in Thailand before doing research for this book, I met people who, were explaining to me that, some people, and some people did have this motivation. It's like, I need to do the absolute minimum necessary to become an arhat ASAP because I don't want to get reborn in samsara. And that's their motivation, and so they'll become a dry wisdom arhat. Yeah? Somebody else may, of course, want to become an arhat, but they want to develop the supernormal powers, the super knowledges. Okay, so that person will attain the fourth jhana, and on that basis, develop the super knowledges and become an arhat. Somebody else may want to do something in between. They may want to develop first jhana or second jhana. Somebody else may even want to, get all the material realm absorptions, even though you don't use those to attain arhatship. They may still want to attain those states. So somebody else may do that. So there's all different kinds of arhats in that respect in terms of the level of meditative absorption they've attained. In general, because the five hindrances are not well suppressed in access concentration and may rebound, it is more secure to develop at least the first jhana as the basis for insight. Okay, so if you can get the first jhana, more secure. While the jhanas are states of full absorption on one object, momentary concentration, a concept introduced in the Pali commentary, so it wasn't spoken of in the suttas, came in the commentaries. Momentary concentration does not restrict the range of awareness to one object. To develop momentary concentration, we direct mindfulness to the changing states of body and mind and maintain continuous awareness of whatever object enters the field of perception. So this is, for example, what Goenkaji has people do, what the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition has people do. Yeah, is you don't have one particular meditation object, but you scan your body or you maintain an open awareness, just noting whatever happens to come and be the object of your consciousness at any particular time. So not clinging to any object, we note the variety of sensory objects, feelings, mental states, and so forth that arise and pass away. Concentration thereby gains in strength until it becomes established one-pointedly on the changing stream of events. So you're samadhi is not on one object as it usually is. It's on the changing stream of events. While constant change in meditation objects usually inhibits concentration, with momentary concentration, single-pointed unification of the mind remains. In time, mindfulness on the changing phenomena in the field of awareness becomes strong enough to suppress the 5 hindrances. Okay, so you see there's all these different ways to do things. Yeah. The 4 establishments of mindfulness develop this flexible yet steady concentration, enabling us to progress along the path of insight, leading to the supramundane path that realizes nirvana. So I think that there's certain ways of using the 4 establishments of mindfulness where you might use that to gain momentary concentration. And there's other ways I would think of using the 4 establishments of mindfulness to first gain insight and then gain serenity. Yeah. In jhana, the mind is focused single-pointedly and unwaveringly on an unchanging object, whereas insight requires observation, analysis, and mindfulness of a changing object, mental functions not usually operative within jhana. So all this agrees with the Sanskrit tradition. Thus, according to the Visuddhimagga and the Abhidharma system, insight is practiced in a non-jhanic state of concentration. This I find quite interesting. And so here you go. Such a state, which is sometimes called Vipassana Samadhi, arises when we have just emerged from jhana and thus are still infused with the power of the jhana. While not as concentrated as jhana, the mind is sufficiently focused to analyze an object without distraction. Okay, so they say that you can't have full serenity and do the analysis that is required for insight. Yeah, so you have to come out of your jhana, but you're still under the influence of the jhana, and so you still have an unusual state of concentration, and you use that to do analysis. Okay. Now, in the Sanskrit tradition, it's somewhat similar because they say that the one-pointedness of serenity and the analysis of of insight, that you can't. It's real hard to get the two to cooperate. So first of all, at the beginning, you go back and forth between these two a lot. It's very difficult to put them together. So, but I'm jumping ahead. So here's the Sanskrit tradition. Finding the correct view of selflessness and proper insight require learning, reflection, and meditation. These are called the 3 understandings or the 3 wisdoms. First, we learn by hearing teachings, studying. Then we reflect, we think about them, we discuss them to make sure we have a proper understanding. Then we integrate them in our mind through meditation. Wrong views concerning emptiness and insight abound. By incorrectly identifying, and believe me, there are so many wrong views, so many. By incorrectly identifying the object of negation, some people negate all existence. So that's the extreme of annihilation or nihilism. Other people remain single-pointedly in a non-conceptual state, incorrectly thinking that since all thoughts grasp inherent existence, abandoning thoughts altogether bring liberation. Is that true, that all thoughts are grasping inherent existence? What's an example of a thought that doesn't grasp inherent existence? Apprehension of some object that you are, it's just, there's no particular anything going on in your mind. Okay. Also, when we're studying about emptiness, hopefully we're not grasping it as inherently existent. Yeah. We may grasp ourselves as inherently existent when hearing the teaching on emptiness. Yikes! I'm real. Okay. So this person, thinks that all concept is grasping inherent existence. So you just have to get rid of all concepts. Don't think. Okay, maybe that's why we have holy cows, because cows don't think much. Okay, so incorrectly, and these people incorrectly think that since all thoughts grasp inherent existence, abandoning thoughts altogether brings liberation. So that would mean that if you're an arhat, you can't make a shopping list. Yeah, and if you're an arhat, you wouldn't be able to decide which kind of light bulb to fit into a certain socket, because all that involves conceptual concept. Okay. In this way, they abandon, the people who think like this, they abandon compassion, generosity, ethical conduct, and other important practices, saying they involve conceptions of true existence. Okay? So anything except, you have to abandon all conceptions. Generosity involves conception. You have to think, I have something, I want to give it to somebody, where's somebody I can give it to? Generate bodhicitta, conceptual mind, give the object, dedicate the merit. So these people abandon the whole method side of the path, thinking that it's all concept of inherent existence. So forget it. Okay, so very dangerous to think like this. Yeah, and Jason Kappa, when you study his treatises, he comes down really hard on this view. However, not all thoughts are conceptions of inherent existence. When we first hear teachings on emptiness and reflect on them, we use thought. Aren't you thinking right now? If you're not sleeping? Yeah, you're thinking, aren't you? Yeah, hopefully you're thinking about what we're talking about. You're not thinking about dinner, because there's no dinner tonight. So you got to think about breakfast. But that's a long ways away, so better to focus on the teaching. Okay. Such conceptual reflection on emptiness is useful, even though our ultimate goal is to go beyond conceptual reflection. Yeah, you use it when it's necessary at a certain level of the path, and you eventually want to go beyond it. But it's like, if you want to get to the top of the stairway, you got to go on the first step and then the second step and then the third step. If you say, I want the top of the stairway, everything else is less than the top step. Therefore, I'm just going to the top step. Yeah, are you going to get there? Yeah. You're going to try and get yourself from the bottom to the top, and you'll probably get hurt in the process. Okay. Furthermore, not all analytical meditation is conceptual. This is important. And that's why the term analytical meditation can be misleading, because when we hear analytical, we think thinking about things, analyzing with concepts. Okay, that's not actually the meaning of analytical meditation. It means that you're probing something very deeply. Yeah, it doesn't mean you're necessarily using words and concepts. It's referring to a mind that really probes to try and understand. Okay, so especially the Tibetan term rikshe. Yeah, so sometimes, what do they call it? Individual analysis. No, that's Soso Rigpa. But anyway, there's different ways of translating it, but also Soso Rigpa, Rikshe, all these things. It's referring Two, it can be conceptual when you're analyzing, let's say, going through the reasoning process using thought. Or it could be non-conceptual when you're really using a probing awareness to examine how things exist. Yogis on the path of seeing and meditation employ non-conceptual analysis to meditate on emptiness. Yeah, so they're not sitting there thinking about emptiness, but they are using non-conceptual analysis. When some scriptures say that emptiness is inconceivable and beyond awareness, it does not mean that we can dispense with analysis aimed at discovering the ultimate nature. Okay, so emptiness is inconceivable, so I don't need to think about it. I don't need to analyze because it's inconceivable and it's inexpressible. So what's the use trying to realize it? I'll just sit there and emptiness will dawn on my mind. Okay? So these statements, emptiness is inexpressible, inconceivable, it indicates only that emptiness cannot be experienced fully through the intellect. In other words, the real experience of of emptiness is not known through words and concepts. Words and concepts are a bridge that help you get there. But when you really experience emptiness, they aren't necessary anymore. So that real, what they call the taste of emptiness, is inconceivable, inexpressible. You can talk about it all you want to, but you can't experience it by words and concepts. For example, let's say you've never experienced what sweet tastes like. I can talk to you all I want about what sweet tastes like. Is that going to be an experience of sweet for you? No. It's just going to be a lot of words and concepts. Maybe it'll get you to the experience of sweet. Yeah, I say look for the chocolate, and this is what chocolate looks like. Yeah, so it may help you get there, but the words themselves are not the realization, the experience. When we have strong concentration, we may have many wonderful experiences. The coarse appearance of subject and object may vanish. Wow. No subject, no object. I'm one with everything. As soon as you think I'm one with everything, you are in duality because there's I and there's everything. So non-duality does not mean oneness. As soon as the word oneness implies more than one, because you can't have one without having two. Non-duality is a simple negation, not two. Okay. But anyway, you can have this feeling of subject and object vanishing, temporarily. Or our mind may become very clear. Yeah, wow. Like when you drop acid, look at those colors. Wow. Yeah, so your mind, everything's very vivid. Or objects may appear insubstantial like rainbows, or may even disappear. Wow, look. That wall, I can see all the atoms. Well, you think you can see all the atoms, Okay, the wall is insubstantial. Or I can peel away the wall because the wall's appearing truly existent and solid. I can peel away that appearance of the wall and get to the real wall that lies behind that, which is empty space. Or maybe, again, like when you drop acid, the wall just became, look at those colors in that wall. It's rainbow colored, you know. Okay, so you can get all these kinds of things. Yeah. However, you know, somebody's going to pop our bubble. These experiences do not necessarily indicate insight into selflessness or meditation on illusion-like appearances. Okay? So just because things appear a little bit illusory to you doesn't mean you're having the illusion-like appearances that come after you realize emptiness. And just because you have some feeling that you aren't as solid as you were before, that doesn't mean you've realized emptiness. Yeah. Those are nice experiences. Like I said before, they're nice. You know, it's nice to know that sometimes we don't have to grasp things so solid. But don't assume that those are necessarily indicative that you are now an Arya. Okay? When you read, there's this book, what's it called? After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. Yeah. So that book, when you read all the accounts of these people, yeah, and how they were kind of let down after their ecstasy, the reason you can see is because they grasp at these experiences. Yeah. Like, I had it. I did it. Maybe I can recreate it. That's always what brings the laundry afterwards. You know? When it's like, okay, I had that, but there's still dirty clothes and nobody else is doing them for me. You know? I got to do my own clean my own mind, clean my own dirty clothes. To avoid going astray, we must correctly identify self-grasping ignorance and its object, inherent existence. Then we analyze whether phenomena exist in the way they appear to the mind obscured by ignorance. Only by irrefutably proving to ourselves the non-existence of inherent existence, the object apprehended by ignorance, can we generate the wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence. So it's only by getting an idea of what inherent existence would look like if it existed, and then proving to yourself that it's impossible for things to exist that way. Only by doing that can we generate the wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence. Since the object of this wisdom, emptiness, directly contradicts the object held by ignorance, such wisdom counteracts ignorance. Emptiness is not an object ordinary beings can know directly through our senses. We can't see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it. We must use reasoning to understand it, and the initial realization of emptiness is inferential and conceptual. There you are. While excellent, this understanding lacks sufficient power to undermine innate ignorance and destroy afflictions. Direct perception of the emptiness of all phenomena is necessary, and since this requires uniting serenity and insight. So we shouldn't be content with just a conceptual, inferential realization of emptiness. That conceptual inferential realization can be extremely powerful and shake your world up, but it isn't yet the direct realization. Serenity is a concentration arisen depending on the 9 stages of sustained attention and held by pliancy, in which the mind is able to remain on its object as long as it as wanted. Insight is a wisdom discriminating its object with discernment, and is held by the bliss of pliancy induced by analyzing its object within serenity. Experiencing mental and physical pliancy induced by stabilizing meditation, that's serenity, is the mark of success in attaining serenity. Experiencing this same pliancy But instead of having it induced by stabilizing meditation that's focused on just one object, that pliancy is induced by analytic meditation. That's the measure of success in attaining insight. Until that time, stabilizing and analytical meditations still subtly interfere with each other. The determining factor for an actual insight on emptiness is being able to refute the object of negation and remain single-pointedly on that emptiness of inherent existence without laxity or excitement, with pliancy being induced by the power of analytic meditation. Okay, so you're able to bring those two things together. To unite serenity and insight, after attaining serenity and gaining the correct view in meditation sessions, first do analytic meditation to discern emptiness. Then do stabilizing meditation on emptiness. Okay, so you have serenity, you have the correct view. Okay, you need to unite serenity and the correct view. So first in your session, you do analytic meditation to discern emptiness. Then you stop the analytic meditation and do stabilizing meditation on emptiness. Analysis ensures that the ascertainment of emptiness remains correct and vibrant, and stabilizing meditation ensures that the mind remains clear and stable on emptiness. Thus, within one meditation session, practice analytical and stabilizing meditations alternatively. So first the analytical, get your emptiness clear, then focus on it single-pointedly. If you start to lose it, go back to analysis, then go back to stabilizing. Okay? If stability decreases due to too much analytic meditation, do more stabilizing meditation. If your discernment of emptiness declines, do more analytical meditation. Okay, so you go back and forth. Then, when doing analytical meditation, go through the 9 stages of sustained attention and develop the 4 mental engagements. So all this was explained in the chapter on the higher training and concentration. At the conclusion of the 9th stage of sustained attention, when spontaneous engagement arises, if analysis itself induces non-discursiveness and a special serenity focused on emptiness, the union of serenity and insight is attained. So for a long time, you've gone back and forth between analysis on emptiness, stabilizing on emptiness, analysis on emptiness, stabilizing emptiness. Then you get to a point where the analysis can induce a special serenity that's focused on emptiness, such that the analysis is what provokes the pliancy, not the stability that provokes the pliancy or induces the pliancy. Okay, then you've united serenity and insight. This mind is very powerful. Whereas previously serenity and insight were different entities, now they occur simultaneously. In one consciousness, the stability aspect is serenity and the analytical aspect is insight. Before rising at the end of a meditation session on emptiness, okay, this is for us, think all phenomena do not exist inherently, but depend on other factors. Thus, sentient beings' actions bring their corresponding results. Not seeing this, ordinary sentient beings become confused, attached, and angry, thus creating the causes for dukkha. Having a precious human life I must fulfill the collections of merit and exalted wisdom to become a Buddha and lead them to awakening. So after you've meditated on emptiness, you again generate bodhicitta. Before you did that meditation on emptiness, you generated bodhicitta. Okay? Then, between meditation sessions, do prostrations, make offerings, practice generosity, ethical conduct, and fortitude with bodhicitta motivation. While doing this, so reflect that the agent, object, and action depend on each other and do not arise inherently. They are like illusions. In this way, all your meritorious practices will be complemented by wisdom. So before you meditate on emptiness, you meditate on bodhicitta. Then you meditate on emptiness. When you come out, you reflect all sentient beings are suffering because they're confused. They think things are inherently existent when they're empty. You again generate compassion and bodhicitta. Okay. Then with bodhicitta, you do all the practices on the method side, bowing, making offerings, generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, being a nice person, doing the dishes, vacuuming the floor, working in the forest, all these things. And while at the end of those actions, or if you can during them, you think the person that's doing them, the object, action, and agent, all these three exist dependently. And because they're dependent, thus they're empty. So you do something, with bodhicitta, working in the conventional world, then you bring an understanding of dependent arising and reflect on emptiness again. Okay, so that is the way we got to practice. Okay, so Chinese Buddhism. So Master Ji, who's a very famous Chinese practitioner. I can't remember what century he was in. I should, but I can't. Anyway, he emphasized that successful Dharma practice depends on balancing the quiescence of serenity and the analytical wisdom of insight. Cultivating serenity without the wisdom realizing emptiness does not bring liberation. So here it is. He's not talking about blank-minded meditation. However, if beginners are taught Nagarjuna's view of emptiness, they may not understand it well and may even generate wrong views. Therefore, we must first be well grounded in the method aspect of the path, generosity, ethical conduct, and other practices, as explained by Maitreya and Asanga. Since the first 5 perfections without wisdom are like a barren house, incorporating the wisdom of reality into them is essential. Through repeated practice, practitioners can join great compassion and bodhicitta with all meditation practices and reflect on the emptiness of the agent, object, and action of all practices they do. Okay, he sounds like somebody from the Tibetan tradition, doesn't he? By learning, reflecting, and meditating on Nagarjuna's texts, practitioners gain the Madhyamaka view. Since not everybody in Chinese Buddhism holds the Madhyamaka view. Xi did, but not everybody does. Some hold the Chittamadra view. Okay. Since the understanding gained from learning and reflecting is conceptual, they seek the union of serenity and insight in order to generate unpolluted wisdom, directly realizing the 8 negations in Nagarjuna's homage in his Madhyamaka, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So, in the homage, no ceasing and arising, no annihilation and permanence, no coming and going, no singularity and plurality. Those are the 8 negations. So, meaning that none of those exist inherently. In 9th century China, there was much discussion on the role of serenity and insight. Some Chan practitioners, this was the 9th century, the end of the 8th century, I think, was when the big debate in Samye was. I think so. I think it's the end of the 8th. So this was a little bit afterwards. So the same is what it's saying here, is that the same view that was debated in Samye and defeated by Kamalashila, there was also discussion about that view in China itself. Okay? So some Chan practitioners stated that Chan was beyond words and concepts and was thus beyond Buddhist scriptures. Zongmi, the Huayan school's 5th patriarch, and he was also a respected Chan master, accepted that final awakening was beyond words and concepts. Okay? However, he said that Chan should not disengage from the philosophical traditions of Buddhism that employ words and concepts to lead sentient beings towards the truth. He encouraged practitioners to study the scriptures, and he cautioned that meditation was not about emptying the mind of all thought, but about cultivating the wisdom of reality. So emptying the mind of all thought, cultivating the wisdom of reality are different. Okay? Highly valuing the method aspect of the path, Zongmi saw the gradual accumulation of merit as essential for developing wisdom. Okay? So he's advocating gradual path, collection of merit, collection of wisdom. Okay? Zongmi described 2 types of sudden teachings, because we hear about sudden awakening. Okay? So he talked about 2 types of sudden teachings. One for beings of sharp faculties, the other as a method of exposition. So the Buddha gave the sudden teaching for those of sharp faculties when he spontaneously and directly revealed the true Dharma to unawakened beings who immediately attained awakening. Here, awakening refers to the first direct perception of reality. It doesn't refer to the elimination of all defilements. It refers to the first direct perception of reality. For Zongmi, this means for the first time seeing that one's own true nature is and always has been the same as the nature of all the Buddhas. At this time, although a practitioner has an experience of awakening, she is not yet fully awakened. She must still remove all afflictions and karmic latencies obscuring the mind. This is done through the gradual practice after the initial sudden experience of awakening. So my friend, who's a monk in the Chan tradition, some of you met him at the monastic gathering. So we've talked about this, and this is also, he confirms, this is how his master has explained it as well. Sudden teachings are not the same as the highest teachings, which also include teachings given for gradual practice. In other words, the highest teachings could be approached in 2 ways, either gradually through consistent development or suddenly through a direct experience of reality. Okay. But either way, they still include the method aspect of the path, those teachings. Okay. Sharp faculty disciples are suited for the sudden teachings, while middle and low faculty practitioners fare better with the gradual approach. The Buddha leads the latter group progressively until they are capable of understanding the teachings on the ultimate meaning. This is the approach shown in the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and in the Nirvana Sutra, where the highest teaching is expounded in a gradual manner, beginning with how to create the causes for fortunate rebirth by abandoning non-virtue and creating virtue. So this is Nagarjuna's same approach in Precious Garland. Then His Holiness says, I once discussed gradual and sudden awakening in a public forum in New York with Master Shen, the founder of Dharma Drum Mountain Organization, and a wise, respected Chan master from Taiwan. He affirmed that in Chan, awakening refers to having the initial direct perception of emptiness. While Tibetan Buddhists occasionally use awakening in that way, more often we use it to refer to the end point of the path, the arhatship of a Shravaka for existence, or the full awakening of a Buddha. Understanding the path in light of the differing use of the word awakening, there does not seem to be a big gap between our traditions. To paraphrase what Master Shen told me, at the time of the Buddha, many people attained awakening suddenly after the Buddha spoke only a few words to them. Chan stories of people realizing emptiness after having been hit or scolded by their teacher apply only to highly accomplished, exceptional students. Not everybody is capable of sudden awakening, and those who are not must begin with the basics of Dharma practice. While those with sharp faculties and good karma may attain awakening quickly or suddenly, they still have to practice method and wisdom after their first experience of awakening, because they are not yet free from all afflictions. Only with Buddhahood is one free from all obscurations. Everyone else practices a gradual path to amass the necessary virtue and wisdom before their awakening. While sudden awakening is possible, it is not easy. It is not like getting something for nothing. People must still keep precepts and cultivate bodhicitta, concentration, and wisdom. So those were the major points that came out in that dialogue that they had, which I happened to be at. It was very interesting. Then His Holiness continues, a few Tibetan texts mention a sudden or instantaneous approach that isn't limited to the structure of gradual practice. I read a Kargyu text that explicitly explains Mahamudra as a sudden path. In Sakya writings, we find mention of the simultaneity of realization and liberation. And the Nyingma Dzogchen practice also speaks of this. Tsongkhapa accepts the notions of simultaneity and instantaneous liberation. However, he points out that what appears to be sudden realization is actually the culmination of many causes accumulated over time that are coming together. This is the case with the Buddha's first 5 disciples who realized emptiness immediately after listening to one teaching on the Four Truths, and with Milarepa, who had engaged in serious practice for many lifetimes before attaining full awakening in that life. So whether we speak of gradual or sudden awakening, accumulating causes and conditions over time is needed for true spiritual development. Okay? So you can see that the sharp faculty disciples who can have sudden or instantaneous realization, they're sharp faculty because they've practiced for a long time beforehand in many previous lives. So that lifetime, it comes. Yeah? But if we haven't done that, or if we've only done part of it, then we're kind of the snails going along, but at least we're going, there's this path for snails, and we're going along the correct path. Yeah. At least we're not a flea who's like, all over the place, okay?